Malware is a non-technical look at the tech news of the week.
This is a podcast where we learn together about everything from crypto to AI to whatever comes next in tech. I'm Natasha Hoskins.
I'm Dina Burke.
And this is Boys Club.
Wait, is it just Boys Club?
It's just Boys Club.
The Boys Club podcast?
No. Just Boys Club. We have a very special malware here.
We do. Go ahead. Give it
No,
up.
you
Give it
go.
up. We talked with Lydia Peng, who is the founder of MØRNING agency. If you don't know MØRNING,
Morning.fyi.
MØRNING.fyi, yeah. Very, very creative thinkers and doers, and our marketing agency, and work with very big brands. And anyway, she's just like someone who is really smart and really creative and a thinker for sure, but also executes on stuff and has a lot of in the trenches experience that she pulls on for her insights. It's not just like think boy stuff. And
Totally.
I really appreciate that about her.
Yeah. Here are some brands that they work with just to level set. Bumble, Everlane, Facebook, Meta, Jordan, Instagram, Margiela, Nike, Snapchat. So just to give you some context for how legitimate this person is.
Yeah.
And the type of work that they do. And what I really loved about this conversation is basically MØRNING put out a report on the state of social media. We talked to Lydia about it, and she builds a case for exactly what Boys Club is. So I feel really great about the interview. And very excited about the future of social media and the future of the internet. And I think we talk a lot about the future of the internet, and oftentimes we're in the tech stack around it. And it was really nice to have a conversation around like how that stack of decentralization, of small community first projects, of people being able to build and create their own brands and economies and applications in a more intimate way is not only what she thinks the future is, but also like necessary to keep the internet fun and kind and interesting. And it's really nice to see all the things that we talk about in Web3 all the time that I'm like sort of banging my head against the wall being like, what are we doing here with all of this?
Totally.
To be like, oh, I can kind of see it all kind of sort of coming together in a way that someone as cool and aesthetically aware as the team at MØRNING is thinking about. And that was really, really encouraging for me personally.
It was a great conversation, so I hope you enjoy. We're here with Lydia Peng. Welcome to the show, Lydia.
Hi, so happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. Friend of the pod, friend of the boys. We're going to be talking to you about the state of social media today. It's a big topic.
Spicy.
Very spicy. So MØRNING, your agency released a report called The State of Social earlier this month. It is kind of an overview, a look at internet culture and kind of a social media audit. The report is in 3 parts. So the first part outlines where things are now. It reflects on the algorithmic flattening of culture, echo chambers, things like feed fatigue. I think topics that we love to talk about a lot. So excited to jump into that. And then it goes into really your call to action, which is about this idea of rewilding the web and reclaiming digital freedom and creativity, and ending with some suggestions. So just spiritually so aligned, and so excited to chat with you about it.
You too. Honestly, when we were writing this, I was literally thinking about you guys. I feel like it is so the kind of thing I feel like we've chatted about over wine. So I'm happy to be having this conversation now.
Yeah, it's great. So is there anything you want to share more about the report, give a little bit more context for readers? Anything we missed on sort of that like high level overview?
No, only that at MØRNING, we believe like more broadly that the web is like this beautiful tool for good. We are like definitely the optimists that see like the sunny side of the digital hellscape we all live in. And I suppose the report was set about to give brands a space to see themselves inside that new reality for social, which has become, I think for brands, a real space of great fear. And, you know, they're conscious of their role in content pollution and so forth, from like apology posts to like black squares, or you know, brands attempting to be demure and mindful in newsletters. It's like tough for them. And so as a brand consultancy and a strategy agency, we really wanted to set brands free and give them an opportunity to like play and deepen their lore, but also be additive and stop littering the internet with shit, to the benefit of culture and to the benefit of this beautiful place that we all love. So yeah, it's very much, I mean, our company motto and mission is be less shit, which is about incremental change. And so I do feel like there's a responsibility in like educating brands on ways to be better online to the benefit of culture broadly. So yeah, that was kind of like, I suppose, the macro ambition of it.
So you're an optimist, which is so interesting to hear you say that, because like, I mean, for two reasons. One, because the aesthetics and sort of the visual direction of your agency, first of all, is incredible.
It's
and
so good.
So
It's
well
so good.
defined. And you guys do an expert job at like, not only one, have like identified this cool, very fresh, very different way of like the goth kind of dark stuff that you do, but also like always nail it. And so there's just consistency that, I mean, you're an expert at it, and that's evidenced by the work that you do for your own brand. But I also think like there's something in both the brand expression and also in this report, which is like, it's dark. It is dark. There's a lot of dark stuff that's happening. And to be an optimist in the face of that, like really takes something. I think it's something that we try and do at Boys Club as well. Like, there's a lot of darkness in the industries that we look at all the time. And like, we make a choice. It's a deliberate choice to try and remain optimistic about like how the good parts of this technology can impact our lives. So I'd love for you to talk more about like that optimism and what it might take for you to like cultivate it every day.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question, because it comes down to like a real like root in my personality, and mourning is such an extension of my philosophy and belief. So I mean, goth inherently is about seeking beauty in darkness. That is actually the philosophy. And so mourning's aesthetic and point of view, although seemingly nihilistic or dystopian, is very much about carving space for truth. And so if you're not coated in saccharine falsity, you're looking it dead in the eye, which means you can see the light very clearly. Is that Leonard Cohen? That the like you can see the cracks of light in the darkness only. And I feel like our outlook and our aesthetic is holding space for that. The fact that it's about, it isn't ugly, it isn't pretty, it is ugly. And that seeing that and looking that in the eye and acknowledging that we exist in the belly of the beast is way more cathartic and freeing, because then we have space to ascend and choose, to your point, the internet we want to create. Because I'm not in the business of like being stagnant in toxic positivity or hope. I feel like that's like soft and potentially slow. I like the idea of this brutalism and acknowledgement, which feels quite punk and positive. And so it's very much tethered to my identity and how I approach the world and business. But then, yeah, the report is very much about, look, we've got all these reports out there that are seemingly going to save us and explain social, but that just feels like it's a soup of like the same information asking us all to do more and be more. And I kind of wanted this report to be a call to action to marinate and perhaps do less. And so, yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
I love that. It really aligns with, I'm reading this book by this Buddhist nun right now that's so good. It's called When Things Fall Apart, for people who are interested. And I knew nothing about Buddhism before reading this book, but one of the things that the book talks about and sort of is central to the Buddhist practice is this idea that hopelessness is actually a good thing.
Exactly.
And that is so aligned with what you're saying. And that like in the act of meditation and noticing and holding all the things in your life, that there's something that is really, that contentment comes from that, and kindness for yourself and others come from that noticing. And I think when you think about the internet and the type of person that I want to be online and the type of internet that I want to see, it's very much aligned with that idea of like, I love the internet, but I want to be cognizant of what I'm consuming on it.
Right. That's so beautiful that you bring Buddhism up, because I feel like rewilding principles and then also this concept of chaos and darkness was very much our like, it was almost like, that's what it is. Like chaos is rebirth. And in Chinese philosophy, in fact, like destruction and chaos is that inflection point where you are in absolute oblivion and thus can create. And so I do feel like there's so much opportunity for creation, which is what is gorgeous about the internet, if we acknowledge those dark corners, I think. So yeah, I love that. I think that's so true about like those Buddhist philosophies of like sitting in the uncomfortable.
You talked a little bit about this, but what your inspiration was, but who did you collaborate on this? It's so beautiful too. The report is so stunning. It's visually just really a pleasure to look at. But yeah, talk a little bit about who you collaborated with. And I know you created this for brands specifically, but yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so it came from a couple of different things. Like it was bubbling inside the agency as a feeling that we felt we needed to codify our thoughts around social, because we were getting asked a lot to paper over the cracks of it for brands, and we were like, we need to go out with some thought leadership to like settle this so that we can then be really bold in our thinking as we consult. And I was also writing a piece for the new Mischief book, which has just come out this week for pre-order, I think. And it's so I wrote an essay about a case for chaos, essentially. So that thought was in my brain. Then the agency was also kind of thinking about the state of social and our perspective on social, frankly, because that's a lot of our business. And we didn't want to just answer social briefs with like more rollout plans and a creator strategy. It kind of felt like it was counter to our belief. And so in order to be really demonstrative with clients, we needed to go out there with a philosophy. And then I think as well, we started talking to incredible people like Yancey Strickler, who wrote an incredible piece about the dark forest web and depressurized spaces. And then our community at Morning, our shadow committee, which is like a group of 200 tastemakers and fixers around the world, and asking their opinions about how they felt about social. And so it really was like a very collaborative, iterative report in that sense. It was very much built by the community, which feels nice and kind of on philosophy for the idea. And then, yeah, like we created it internally, but then also collaborated with Lee Heisig, who's a incredible designer in Paris, who helped us get out of our own way and not pastiche ourselves and make it too morning. We wanted to make sure it looked and felt like a iteration of ourselves without it being chintzy. How do you depict this rewilding of the internet without it feeling utopic and, I don't know, sort of trivial? And so she did a really good job of generating in Midjourney loads of weird rewilded creatures with like multiple nipples and several legs. And it just kind of felt like it all came together, this like gross, cute aesthetic, you know?
Mm-hmm, totally.
I want to talk about like if we feel like it's really possible, because I think there's like an optimism about technology generally and how it can impact our lives. And then there's also like a real reality about how the algorithms work on these platforms that we spend so much time on, and how they reward conformity in many ways, and how this idea of conformity versus like true creativity feels hard right now when we're in an attention economy that the algorithms determine who wins and who loses. And I want to believe it's possible, but I also feel a little helpless in the face of it when it's kind of feels like the algorithm's out of my control. Of course, there's all these like other cool decentralized social stuff, and we live in that world, but there's no distribution, there's no reach in that world yet. And so the bridge feels far.
Yeah, I hear you, but I think it's a really interesting to hear you use the word reach, because I think what I'm arguing for, or at least trying to give attention to, is the power of the potent, small, sometimes hidden, unknown spaces and the accumulative impact of that. Like, you know, we compare in our report around rewilding the web and like nourishing it. And rewilding as a principle is about shepherding something back to biodiversity, and it's slow and iterative and collaborative, and it's not finite or final, which I find comforting, because I don't think that there is a binary answer or switch. I'm not like, oh, we're going to return to Web 1 vibes. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say or fight for. I think the next version of us will be not in spite of all of that sameness and cultural flattening, but because of it. And therefore we'll find like exciting new edges inside of that. I don't think that they will exist inside the algorithm. I think there will be interesting emergent pockets, but I think we're looking for joy and creativity in the wrong places. If we're asking that of those spaces, I think that's too tall an expectation. I almost feel like I have acquiesced and like accepted the spaces where that is happening, and I'm now excited to like carve and frankly design spaces where it isn't, which I think is more rousing than ever, because I've always been an infiltrate from within gal. I've worked for big corporates. I've like done pretty well on centralized social. I've always been good at leveraging that beast, but never have I felt more inspired by to create my own products. And I've never felt like that. I've always been like, I've kind of got in line and like been good at infiltrating from within. But when I think about things like, you know, pi.fyi and that kind of anti-algorithm, I built this in a few weeks over Thanksgiving, what do you think? Tyler Bainbridge's project, born out of the newsletter. Obviously, he's leveraging Web 1 aesthetic, which I think is nostalgic and cozy. But I do like watching people literally code products as a solution to something they're not getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I'm hearing from you that is coming out of this report, and I'm seeing as in the landscape of our world, is there's all of these centralized social media platforms. They're competing for attention, and everybody's it's almost like player versus player type thing, where everybody's trying to get to the top of the algorithm. That produces so much noise, and it becomes a race to who can be the most edgy or the most played to those algorithms in a way that's really inauthentic and not true to what you're speaking of like authentic creativity. It's a different thing. And that's happened. And then there's all of this technology that's happened that has made the ability for people to create their own pockets of the internet easier than ever.
Yes.
Like, it's easier than ever to build your own apps. Mm-hmm. It's easier than ever to launch your own financial rewards and economies with meme coins and things like that, as well as this move towards niche and creator first content. So like we're looking at Substacks or Beehives or that type of world. And I think Perfectly Imperfect is a wonderful encapsulation of all of these things coming to life in one project. But I totally see the world that how we've gotten to where we are and how that is a more positive and more a space that is nurturing to distinct communities and creativity. I think one of the things that I constantly sort of come back to with us at Boys Club is like, that is limiting as a business. You're inherently a small business if that's going to be the game that you're playing. And I'm curious if that's something that's come up for you as you're talking to brands and as you're painting this picture of a new type of landscape around social media. And when I talk about social media, I'm talking about a very broad stroke, not just like Instagram. I'm talking about like everywhere we show up in a social way online today, and what those conversations have looked like in a really practical way when you're painting this landscape of sort of a new, more intimate, more niche way of approaching this type of creation.
Very challenging.
Yeah.
They're really hard conversations and are somewhat counter to commercial success in my business. But Morning has always led with philosophy first, product second. And so we will consult and shepherd brands to better if they are open to hearing. And most of them are starting to understand that actually being big and littering the internet with content corn and more is not better. They're realizing that now. You see the massive brands who are trying to feel small by collaborating with, neighborhoods or local communities because they're trying to tap into the potent and the niche. And so it's a challenging conversation because it is right now seemingly at odds with scale, commerciality. So for us, a big part of this report was laying the landscape for why this is necessary and urgent, and then saying to brands, right, well, now partner with us to figure out a roadmap for what that looks like for you. Are you launching a WhatsApp community? Are you partnering with folks on the ground in a certain region in order to co-create product? Like, if you have appetite to operate in that way and you have the resources and you're able to be brave enough to play long game, we're here for it. We'll help you. We will be with you on that whole journey, but it will take a minute. You will purge following. You may not necessarily get, the metrics that you were imagining right away. It's not short-term gain, this. It's long-term gain. And I feel like some brands are up for that and some brands are not. And I feel like the ones that are brave and want legacy and longevity are on board and see it. But it is a challenging conversation. It's really tough. And it's hard for me to turn away briefs that are potentially like, a month sprint to do something that I know is just going to litter TikTok, and it's like, actually, that's not really going to set you up. I could take your money, but it's not going to help you.
Yeah. What does the ideal end state, or I know, you spoke about rewilding being this constantly evolving thing, which I think is a really cool way to think about it. But like, if it is a long game, like what are some of those examples or outcomes that you think would be really cool or positive or potentially have commercial impact over a longer period of time for some of these brands or people that you're talking to? Like, curious, like how it comes to life.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think like if we dig in, beyond like marketing comms feeling more generous and abundant and decentralized, which is kind of a veneer, isn't it? If we actually dig into the infrastructure of like low-key capitalism, this is about us shifting our models for how we are being paid, how we're selling goods, how we're collaborating, how we're profit splitting those collaborations. So this is all to say that the future state for these types of expressions for brands will mean them having to fully transform their literal infrastructure as a business if they want to meet their promise and meet the community where it's at. If they want to be rewarded with longevity and depth and true engagement, then brands actually need to start to co-author with the internet, with the community, in order to win commercially. So it's a tough one because it's an ugly answer because it's not easy to do. And I don't think everyone will make it. And I'm glad.
Yeah, it reminds me of when, in the olden days when we were all trying to, us elder millennials were trying to onboard brands to social media in the first place, where it was like this moment where, whatever, MySpace, early Facebook was happening, and marketers like myself were looking at it and being like, okay, big brands, it's an opportunity for you, but in order to do it, you're going to have to really change a lot of the ways that you think about comms, you think about marketing. You got to, be far less precious. This isn't a 30-second TV ad. Like, there was that education that was happening at the time. And, for better or worse, it happened the way it happened. But that was definitely a conversation I remember having at agencies many, many times with brand partners who were like, I want some social, but I want to still have everything go through legal in the same way that like a 30-second ad spot did. And so kind of like what you're saying is that same kind of moment happening, but also like applying it. It's not just a superficial like comms and marketing effort at this point. It's like going down into the stack of the business and like the product creation and the way that the business is run. Is that like an accurate way to be thinking about it?
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's like we can't paper over a rotten core with marketing anymore. We used to, and frankly, my job was way easier. But now you can't do that no more. The model has to mirror the true intention, and you have to commit to the bit. And so brands that are built now, like you think of, folks like Telfar, are set up to roll that way inherently because it's built into the bones of their business model, and that's why they're winning. And that's why legacy brands are struggling because they're having to unlearn and undo a lot of things that have set them up for success in years past when we were rattling around trying to convince them. I remember those times exactly. But it's an interesting moment because we have shifted through the era of social cut downs and then brand omnipresence and influence, and now we're in this era of infiltration where provocation is the currency. But what I'm asking my brand partners, the ones we've been working with for years, is get yourself ready to now be truly co-authoring culture again. Like you can't just be a mouthpiece. You have to say something relevant and say less, but better.
In your report, you talk about sort of like an influencer era where it was like all influencer first. And I feel like and what we're talking about here and like the small and the cozy spaces and the community built out of sort of these like smaller invite only or affinity based communities or whatever it is. Do you think that's still like creator first in some way? How do you balance? Something I constantly struggle with is like, are we just repeating the influencer model in like a different way with different words, but it's the same thing? Or how do you think about sort of the move of, I think about like Feed Me and Emily Suddenberg and like that type of brand that's being built and her media presence and that feeling like very creator first, like every single one of her newsletters is a photo of her first. And like, that's part of it, but it feels different to me than the influencer landscape of, I don't know, even 5 years ago. But I can't quite put my finger on what the difference is. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts around that in the new wave that you want to see.
Yeah, I have thoughts. They're not fully codified, but I agree with you. There was a moment where influence meant knowledge about something, and then it sort of fractured, and it was like influence meant like saturating you in who I am, versions of myself, and that abundance and that oversharing will win me views. And I think we're returning now to a space of expertise. People still want to engage with true influence, and they want to understand what the value exchange is going to be, which is why I think it's interesting when you see folks, building these communities, potent, but still like, 20, 30,000 communities who are gathered around a specific, mushroom foraging for me. And I feel like those forums and those Discord groups and those Facebook groups, like it is about that. and we're all there for the same reason, and we're influencing each other, and there will be folks that lead those communities. And I think in that sense, creators are still world building. It's just smaller and more specific. And I only want to listen if it's about that. Like, I'm not interested if you're going to suddenly become like an entire lifestyle curator and you're going to tell me what curtains to buy, what soap to use, and where to go on holiday. It's almost like pick your thing and do it well. So maybe it's more about the curation element inside creators.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I about a year and a half ago, my Instagram was hacked, and it was a gift because it made just like I just had to restart, and have been really thoughtful about like who I'm following and the intake that I have on Instagram. And once you do that and you then get back to it, you're like, wow, matcha lattes and Pilates. Like, I cannot see another woman posting. I literally can't. And it worked, and it was a thing that like people built businesses off of, which is wonderful. But like, I'm so disinterested in that. But when I think about what has happened, when you think about people who have taken off on TikTok, a huge part of it is like they're one thing. They're like, this is the thing that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about it over and over and over again, and I'm an expert in this thing.
Yes.
And that has what's worked. And I think that it's the same sort of what you're speaking to, of like expertise and influence as like a real driver of why people want to consume and follow specific creators, as opposed to, just full lifestyle brands that are people. And I think it's just tired, and people are fatigued by it.
I think it's fatiguing, right? And I think also I'm excited about this return to craft over graft. I like this idea of like small, meaningful gestures that are specific versus like such abundance and like kind of pollution. I think there's something really nice about craft getting its flowers, and I think that with brands, before it was all brands trying to like shit post and then like post every day and like consume stories, and it was like, it felt like never ending, honestly. And I'm glad we're through that now. And I say to brands like, post less. You don't need to post 2 times a day. Your community management voice doesn't need to be consistent. You're a fucking human being as well. Like, let's just like find our edges and be fallible. That's like gorgeous and alluring, and that's what we want. And so I'm excited about this return to craft and seeing more polished creativity. Like, I think about Isamaya and the world she's built around her beauty brand, and like, they are not social first assets. It's like a music video, and it's like a crazy set design. It's not even formatted correctly, but like, it doesn't matter because it's a world she's built, and I'm a bit like, I kind of want to be in it, and I'm going to buy the lipstick.
Yeah, totally.
You have so many wonderful phrases and sort of just like ways that you describe things. One of them is the chaos pendulum and constructed chaos. Can you talk to us more about that?
Yes. So at Morning, we believe in acknowledging the kind of coexistence of seemingly at odds elements. And so this spectrum of chaos and order we see as an antidote, because it embraces the swing, right, between all these planes at once and the coexistence of them all. And I think it's very millennial of us, and very old school millennial social media marketing to crave the binary. Like, this is a rollout plan, this is how you beat the algorithm, this is how you win. So I like the idea of moving out of a binary space and instead willingly moving between planes of random, underground, demystified, and brutalist. And so if we think about chaos as an ingredient for brands and constructed chaos, some of the examples that we have in the report are things like Brat, which is a really nice example of expert marketing. It's simple, it was specific, and then they allowed it to get adopted and grow with the audience. So that, I think, is like a gorgeous example of constructed chaos. You gave the audience the tools to go and build on it for you. They chose to make it viral versus the awful when you get a brief and it says KPI virality, and you're like,
forget it.
Babe. So
unsubscribe.
So there's a, I think it's very rousing for marketers to think about chaos as an ingredient instead of something to be feared. We're like so terrified that the consumer is going to run off and misunderstand our CTA. But how wonderful if they are, if they're kind of like bewildered and then they feel like they want to explore it or build on it. And I think that generative nature has been missed in marketing a lot. Like, I think again about like Kanye buying that Super Bowl ad spot, the most expensive Super Bowl ad spot, and then it just being like a camera video of himself being like, buy the shoe, like whatever. It felt like that was a place where we're used to seeing glossy, corporate cinematic TV ads and the disruption of that media placement. I loved the chaos of that. It felt like it woke us all up, and it felt so self-aware and full of satire. And so I think that's really interesting as well when we think about that. I also think it's interesting that both those references I just gave you are individuals instead of brands. And I do think that celebrities and personas, they're always ahead when it comes to social. They're so much more agile and they're so much more nimble around how they build lore. And I feel like that's probably why Skims has done so well. Like, they are on it. Like, I come up with a thought on who would be smart for that to be included in the campaign. It's there the next day. Like, I don't know how they're so reactive and agile, but it has this reactivity which feels purposeful and chaotic without feeling like desperate and like clinging on to the trend cycle. So there's something in that too. Similarly, Essence, I feel like, is a really nice example. She knows herself. She knows her consumer. There's like a obnoxious specificity to the copy. And I'm like, yeah, you've done it. You've nailed it. Just carry on as you were.
Skims and Kim just have me just in their grip.
Yeah.
Every time. I'm just like, wow, I can't stop. I can't stop ordering from this place. And it's really extraordinary it's so fun to watch a brand, a huge brand, be so successful and how nimble they are. And it's a great example of that it's possible. Okay. I just want to end. What is your advice to brands? A few sentences on, okay, if you're a creator in this landscape, if you're a brand in this landscape, like, you've spoken to this a bit, but like, just the main takeaway that they should have as they're thinking about their social media strategy for 2025.
Fuck. Okay. No. I think a lot of what we've spoken to here has been about bravery and seeking like the wild, rewilding yourself. So I think find your people, go deep, do less better, forget clawing for reach and jumping on cringe trends that is like going to make you imminently passé. Find your people and be generous with them, and they will reward you.
Wow, preach. I could listen to it all day. I love it.
Okay, wait, one last thing. Favorite meme at the moment?
My favorite meme at the moment is praying. I've just put it on a hat, so that's why it's top of mind. But I love the meme, whole day I'm fucking busy, only get few money.
I haven't come across her.
It's perfect.
I can't wait to see.
I look at it and I'm like, fuck, I hate that. It's so accurate. I hate it. Whole day I'm fucking busy, only get few money.
Man, truer words.
So I'll be buying the hat.
Tattoo it on my head. Lydia, thank you so much. This was so fun to talk with you, and really always endlessly inspired by the way that you see the world and the internet and your kindness and creativity around it. So thank you for sharing it with us today.
Appreciate you guys. So fun to hang out.